between those numbers is up to you. So this is our carcass opening for, I think, the center drawer, approximately what we're looking at, what you're going to be making. So whether you had a wood frame or panel divider, it doesn't really matter. This is obviously an enclosed box in a way, but the only thing a piston fit drawer actually runs on is the bottom of the sides. So that is the only thing that's really touching your carcass opening. It's maybe gently gliding here, but really it shouldn't be touching. It's just the bottom. And so you can overdo it quickly. And when you get a racking drawer, it can look really good, but then if it doesn't function properly, it can be very frustrating. The goal of a piston fit drawer is to be able to open it with ease 3/4 of the way and take one finger and close it back up. Not pushing in the center, but off side a little bit. If there's any racking, that's going to happen when you push it. But if it's piston fit, it's just going to go right in. That's the goal, right? Can't guarantee that, but just go slow with the process. I have already uploaded on the classroom. There's a new section called drawer making there, and it's a step-by-step guide on how I do it, how I like to mill it up. Everything I'm about to talk about is on there, pretty much. How I like to do it and size them. And then I have 3 articles from Fine Woodworking on how other makers do it. And some ideas I took from them, some I didn't like. So read all of it. You might find something you really like within that. The first thing I do once pieces are roughly to size. And so right now the thickness is done. The length is a little too long and the width is a little too wide, but thickness, I'm at final thickness and I'm sizing this to my carcass. My drawer sides, I don't really have triangles on here yet. You can, but you're gonna rip them off. What is important to note about your sides is that they stay square, and so you can go right to the machines and cut all these square. The drawer front and back might not be square. There might be a taper to them. If your opening is tapered, you need to taper that. So that's a little bit of a different process, but these, pretty much no matter what, stay square. Then these are gonna be your tail boards, these sides. What you're looking at for the sides is, you take my square, and I can go to my carcass opening and I can pull this out and just kind of measure from top to bottom where the width of the drawer is going to be.
Inside to inside?
Inside to inside. And I want to see what number I'm at on the very edge over here and the very edge over here on the very left and the very right, because my drawer sides need to fit snug. Right, they need to be snug, and it needs to be a sliding, snug fit. So there's really no racking involved in that. And for whatever reason, when I was gluing this up, doing my joinery, one of these sides might be a little taller than the other, and so then I'm going to have to size, each side individually. I don't want to assume if I measure one, it's the same on the other side. And let's see. These look pretty good. So they're at about 3.5. So that's fine. And what I'll do is when I'm looking at my drawer sides, I also need to think about when this is all coming together, I might need to do some planing on the outside of my drawer side, on this face, right, after I do the glue up, because it might start to go in and then be a little too snug, and I gotta just take this side down a little bit. You always want to plane from the drawer front to the back, because I don't want to risk any tear out on my drawer front. I don't want any, just like you don't want any marking gauge lines on there, you just want that to be as clean as possible. So I need to read the grain and kind of make sure I know that I can plane this down. Otherwise, you're going to have a heck of a time when it's all together. And so as a reminder, I can look at some of this is actually a pretty nice straight grain board, but here's some of my cathedrals sort of traveling down in this orientation. And so if I look at the growth rings and I see a frown, right, on the growth rings, I'm moving from the top of the cathedrals down. That's in general, you're gonna get a good plane surface that way. And then I just fill it a bit like that with the smiles up, and then I can go in that orientation, okay? So basically just mill your pieces up and, you know, make some notes, do some testing with it. So then I know, okay, I want this side on the outside here, so I know I can plane it down if I need to. I'll set this to just over 3.5, and I'll sneak up on that sliding fit. Almost there. So I can fit both those sides, and they're sliding in there nice and clean, and I can't really, I mean, there's maybe a hair racking. There will be some movement. Now again, that's the other benefit of using a softwood, they move less, and you know, Eastern White Pine that's quarter or rift sawn, it doesn't move. I mean, you can get that really tight, because we are in the driest season right now, and it's only gonna expand more. So your seasonal opening, that gap is gonna have to be pretty much the biggest it's ever gonna be right now. The best time to build furniture is July, because you can just have that drawer just fit, and you know it's only gonna get smaller. So that slides in comfortably. I got both my sides in there. Now the length I've already cut to size. But the way you want to determine that is you will have, you know, your drawer is going to sit inside of that carcass. Maybe it's flush with your dividers. Maybe it's stepped in 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch from that divider, or maybe it's pushed out. You know, just as you probably have already experienced on like your step stool or something you've brought home now, is that you flush up those dovetails and then you feel again and they're not flush anymore, right? So as it moves seasonally, it's always gonna be out of true, like just as it lives its life. So that's why that's why I've always had on these projects where dividers step themselves in a little bit, so no matter what as it moves, it always has some sort of shadow line or spacing for the rest of its life as a box. So stepping it in a little bit, whatever you do, you need to account for how much you're stepping it in, the thickness of your web, and then how far back your side's actually going to go, because you know it starts here, you know, not at the front of my drawer. So then there's also something we're going to put in there that is not in the plans, called drawer stops. And when you close a drawer, it's not hitting the back panel, right? It's hitting drawer stops. And the drawer stops can hit two spots. They can hit the very back of your sides, basically where it's running, back here. Or you can have a really thin piece of hardwood that you glue in the front. And as you close that drawer, it hits right back here on your drawer front, somewhere for it to stop. So all that being said, the point is that the length of your entire drawer does not go all the way back to your back panel. You want it to be a little smaller. So if I have drawer stops in the back that are, I don't know, 3/8 thick, I need to account for that right now before I do my joinery, otherwise I'm gonna put that drawer in, it's gonna be popping out. It's gonna be popping out like that. We don't want that. So,
could you drive it, the front of it, do the sides, and then kind of mark where you want that to stop at?
yeah, totally.
Because you said don't do your joinery until you figure those out, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, so you could, I mean, and if you mill this all up and then you realize you want to cut your sides a little shorter, that's fine. You know, you can still do this whole process. So the reason we don't have the drawer hit the very back panel, that bridle joint panel you're going to make, is because with a hardwood or just solid wood panel on your drawer, that's also expanding and contracting. So as you pull this panel, as you pull the whole drawer out seasonally, this is, right now it's flush with the back. That might push itself out beyond the back of your drawer. And I don't want to have my reveal, I don't want to work on this reveal and then all of a sudden that gets pushed out. I want there to be a and it doesn't, remember, wood does not move in its length. So if I'm hitting right back here or here, I mean, and this movement on the drawer, it's not enough to account for it. So you just never bottom it out like that. The exception, you know, yeah, of course there are. The wall cabinet drawer, I don't have a drawer stop. It's so little and cute and tiny that it just hits the back and it's fine. And it is, it's a cute little drawer. So that's what's going on. I've accounted for how my plane's gonna run and on my drawer sides. And these are both fitting. Maybe they're different heights. I need to know that, and I need to know what my right and left is. And I can get a triangle on here. Alternatively, you could get really close to the table saw, and then you could go upstairs and get a hand plane finish on top of this. If your wood's burning or if the table saw blade's dull, you just want that look, because any more work you do on this surface is shrinking that width. It's giving you not as good of a fit anymore. So, sides are done. Now, the drawer front, this is 3/4 thick, that's what it looks like, and I need to pick what my front is, you know, whatever, you're doing something special, you're using the whole wide board, whatever's going on, you need to figure that out. This is going to be my front, and it should be a little too big, yeah, a little too long. And so the first thing I'm going to do is take a small square, and I'm going to check the squareness of my carcass opening. So I'm going to set my square right here. That looks pretty good. That looks even better. So ideally, one of your corners is square. And if not, at least one is square. And I'm gonna base everything off that square corner, because now I know that I can go to the machines that I trust to cut square and start from there and then move outward. So this corner on the right is nice and square for me. So I have this a little bit oversized, and I know that that's going to sit nice and clean right there. That's good. I'm first going to rip this to width a little bit better. And now I want to check my opening. So I measured, I measured here, and I measured here when I was doing the sides. I'm also going to measure in the center. People forget to do that, and your divider could dip or bow, right? So you need to kind of know what the widest point is. You want that. The whole thing is we're just adopting whatever the carcass opening is. That's how you're going to have your drawers look the cleanest. So I'll measure here. And yep, pretty close to 3.5. I mean, nothing I see as a major error. You know, more accuracy would be pulling your calipers out and using the inside jaws, just to get those. If something looks not quite right, those are a good thing to pull out. So about 3.5. Now I'm set to where that was sliding comfortably. I'm just gonna nudge it back out a little bit, come back to that. And which is great. It's a good spot to be. I'm not thinking about it. The gap's going to be bigger at the top, right? I'm just not thinking about that quite yet. I'm just going right to my carcass opening. And over here looks pretty good, even though the length is a little too long. That's a snug fit. I like where that's at. So now I need to get the length going. For that, I pull the crosscut sling.
By the way, is tight down.
Yeah, it looks good. It's heavy.
Yeah.
And I am trusting my 90-degree corner here. So that's my first zone. And then I need to look again and see how it's tapered. Where is it wider in this length, or is it wider down here? Both. It looks like it's just wider down there on that bottom corner. Okay, so that means I'm going to have to taper sort of in this orientation. So widest. I can make a square cut now at the widest point, and then I taper to that other angle. And what I'll do is knife. Who has a knife?
Oh. Yeah, sure. Which one?
Thank you. So, how many do you have?
Two that are
I'm going
showing.
to nudge this inside my carcass, and my widest point is on the underside. Now it's sort of projecting out like this, so again, I need to sort of overdo my cut. But I can set this in here, nice and snug. And however you actually do it, I'm not going to be able to do this to the box probably, but however you got to get yourself going. I'm going to make a mark right where that opening. I like to use a knife that's just really, it can be really clean when it needs to be for this. So that's the wider point. Just a little mark right there, you can barely see it. And I'm gonna go this way actually. Bring this down. And this is where a new zero clearance is helpful. If it's not a zero clearance, I want to know right where the blade's cutting. You can put some blue tape down there while you're working on this. That's always, you know, not as clean, but it works. And let's make a cut. Still see my knife a little bit. So that is just going in. So in reality, it's actually not tapered. You have this very ideal box that Michael made for us.
Good job, Michael.
And we thank him for his service. And that is a pretty good place to be, right? It is fit snug in there, but it's still a little too tight, but we are nearly there. And I have it oriented properly. Now, let's say you do have this. I just knocked it out. This is why we don't put the back panel on yet. It's gonna be a lot of that. Especially some people put the back panel on and they're actually fitting their drawer, and then they realize, how do I pull it back out? And that's where blue tape.
Kodak moment.
Yeah, blue tape is friendly. So what you can do is take a wedge, and I can, let's say I needed to, taper in this orientation. So kind of make a cut. I'm just showing you where you would go, and you can take a wedge and force it out of square on the crosscut sled. Now, you could take all day and find the angle. I mean, it's these tapers are usually fairly subtle, but you really just gotta influence it and start sneaking up to it. There'll be a lot of pencil marks on here soon, I'm sure, and because you're gonna have to know, right where you put your piece of wood and right where you put that wedge, and the thickness of that wedge will change, the angle of that wedge, so you can use the same one. You can always double them up if you need a more severe taper, that kind of thing, right? You can alternatively bring it closer to the fence, and that's gonna pull it out more, right? So but if you want that repeatability, you just gotta make some marks on where you're at, and you just sneak up to your fit. That's the whole thing. So I can, let's just say I need to taper this. And I like to try and always orient the wedge away from the blade. I feel like I have a better hold. You could do something like that. I mean, that works, that's fine. If you drew all those lines and you realize you have to put the wedge close by to pivot it that way, that's fine. Just don't get it, where the blade's going. So let's say I gotta make a taper cut. And this is where zero clearance really comes in, because one of those corners is probably to length. So I don't wanna cut anything off down here. I just need to take a little bit of a taper cut up here. So I don't wanna interfere with my curve. Just do something like that. See where that color change is? So that's that taper, and it's very controlled, very consistent. Something that can be really hard to do with a plane. Just if you just have this set up in your bench and try and, you can, people do that, but I just find it very challenging. So that's how you gotta taper stuff, and now that is fitting snug inside of there. Now I have my back, and this whole time I haven't really touched the back. It's the same, it started as the same width as my sides and front. And if you look at the sample drawer, you'll see that the back is not nearly as wide as the sides in front. It's a step above that groove you need to run for the panel. You do that after joinery. It can be, it's just easier to do. So what I'll do here is I'll know what I want my back to be, and I'll reference flat side, like a flat. I'm keeping this edge nice and true to itself, and usually I'll do something like this where I will it's totally the back's totally too big right now. I'll take a pencil mark on the top. That's where I need to rip it off. I need to get rid of that pencil mark, right? And I'll take a knife. I'll stripe the sides. And maybe one of them is square. I'll note the square side so I can do that right here at the crosscut sled. And if the other side has a taper to it, I'll rip it at its most narrow point and then sneak up on that taper. All you need to do is you need to mimic your front to your back. We need to assume whatever taper is occurring is it's traveling all the way through your carcass. Now there's mysteries with drawers where like the divider, a panel divider, steps. It gets narrower as we slide as you bring that side in, maybe it's this wide up here and then it gets more narrow back here. You need to do that by hand and clean that up. So all those are a factor, but once you size this and your sides, right now it could be like it's fitting and then it's stuck. I can't, so then I need to shrink it in the back only. If I take a bunch off here, I'm gonna have a droopy drawer, where you pull it out and the whole thing goes like that. We don't want that. We want it to stay pretty nice and true. Let's go here. And then I'll cut my back and front, and those both can fit inside of there. I mean, you could try and fit this from the back if you wanted. I don't usually do that. But those things go in, and now I can take, these are, imagine they're the same, and now I got my triangle on there, so I'm building that triangle on top of my drawer. And you may need to label them, especially when you have drawers the same size. This is where you need to put 1, A, B, C, whatever it is. Mix it up, and the back. So at this point, all 4 of yours are sized. You've milled it, it's sized. Now you can do your joinery, right? Now you can do the half lines that we did last week, lay that stuff out. Traditional through on the back, except on the back, notice right here, that is a half tail right there, right? Just like you're doing the miters, but there is no miter. There's a half tail because there is no reason to have a half pin that does not connect with something that doesn't have the same width, right? There's no reason to have joinery down there. So you can basically, what a lot of folks do is, this one is that. The tail layout is mimicked. It's the same, right? So the spacing, half pin here, pin, 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 and then another half pin, and you just ignore the layout of the half pin here. So we have a wider half tail. And through that half tail is where you're gonna run this groove. That groove is half the thickness of whatever your drawer side thickness is. So if it's 3/8, you're raising that blade to 3/16 and running a groove all the way through. And you need to ensure that that groove also goes somewhere behind that tail at the bottom, because we don't want to see the groove. And it'll be hidden if we do that through the tail. So, and then we also run that groove in the tail socket on the drawer front, right? So where this panel is going in is right behind there. There's a groove right there all the way around. Basically, you set your fence and you do all your drawers right? You're measuring from the bottom of your sort of drawer, the sides here, and the bottom of your drawer front are running against the fence. And you're running that groove on all three pieces for all the drawers. You can run that groove before or after joinery. I like to do it before, because then I know exactly where I need to put my tails. Because what happens is people want their tails to look cool, and they do some like interesting design, and then realize that they need to put their panel groove like 1.5 inches above, you know, how deep their drawer could be. And then they realize, oh, I'm not really using the real estate of how deep my drawer could be. So I think it's best to run it first, and then I'm working within those parameters. Where does this go? About the top of this, the top of that groove, is about 5/8 from the bottom. 5/8 from the bottom, because the drawer panel is almost always 3/8 thick. So it just gives us a little bit of a room so that we make sure nothing runs on there, and we're only sliding on those sides. Okay? When you're running that groove as well, right, you are doing your half the thickness of your sides, and then it's good practice to do all your sides, then raise the blade up, keep the fence exactly where it is, raise the blade about 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch, and that groove is going to be a little deeper in your drawer front, and that accounts for the movement of the panel. And so the dado that you're going to make in the panel is not going to bottom out in that groove in the drawer front. You're going to lock it in with a screw here, and you're going to force that movement forward. Right? That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Alternatively, you could bottom out the panel, and you can make more of a slot, sort of like what you're doing with the web frame, where you're letting that screw move around. You could have a slot here where you can force the panel movement to the back. That's fine too. Both are correct. And I think the articles cover both of those. Okay. Last thing, I believe, when you're milling up your drawer sides, you know, traditionally we're using a secondary wood, a softer wood, let's call it pine. But if you've seen on, can you grab one of Michael's drawers? On Michael's drawers, and I've talked about this, where you run a strip of some hardwood that's actually running on your carcass. And over time, you know, that softwood's going to wear away. Well, hardwood's not going to wear away in the same manner. It's stronger. And so Michael has his pine drawer sides, and then has a hardwood strip right here, right? And he made sure that hardwood strip sat below where his tails are. It just doesn't affect anything like that. This could be even thinner. You could make this half the thickness he did. It would still be doing its job. But it's a really good thing, and it's nice to shellac and wax the bottom of that when you're fitting it, and it just slides in clean. When you're doing a glue up for that, you know, you'll take he did exactly as I've talked about before, which is taking a 1x12 from Lowe's, some pine 1x12, ripping the cathedrals out and basically tossing them, keeping the Rifter quarter sawn stuff that you get on that wide board, and between those two Rifter quarter sawn pieces, he has a strip of some hardwood. And now maple's good, it's just really tight grain, it's not going to chip out like oak. And you glue that all together, and you plane it all down together, and I would rip this right down the middle, and then size my drawer size. So I've already determined my bottom. So this needs to be, you know, 3/4 an inch wide of hardwood, that's it. And then you can size up from there, post planing that stuff.
So that would be like the rails of the drawer?
Yeah, I mean, we call them the runners.
Right, okay.
Runners, yep. So these are his runners, that's exactly what he did here. And it looks good, it's a nice little touch. And one of the guys in those articles did that, that's where I got that, and I've never not done it since. I think it's a good look, and it made sense to me.
If you use walnut, you don't need it.
If you use any hardwood, you wouldn't need it, yeah. You could as an accent. Maple's harder than walnut, but unless you want to. It's really for the soft stuff.
Okay.
And And it looks like you got hickory on the back here, Mr. Ran out, so I don't know, that's fine.
It's a Frankenstein box.
So, that's drawer fitting. So it's just like 33 things, it's fine. But there is, read through that stuff. Step away from the family with a full tummy and read all those articles. It's very helpful. It's
Jeez.
a drone. Yarrow eats those. Am I missing anything? Ooh, one more thing. The back here, you see how it's kind of rounded over? I call that ski booting. And so that's like one of the last things you do is you fit this and you go tick, 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 tick. And so when you pull this in and out, you're not going to accidentally hit a very sharp edge and just
You do it with a block plane?
with a block plane. Yep. And
I need to see this technique.
sure. So ski booting don't hurt. Again, it just shows signs of handmade, hand plane finish. It's a nice thing to do. All these edges are broken, by the way, right? You got to think about all those things. So it's a whole other box inside your box. When you're two more things. When you're gluing up, ideally your joinery is pretty darn good. You need like the smallest amount of glue. There's really no reason to use hide glue for this kind of stuff. Just use some yellow glue and move on. Ideally you don't need clamps. Now, let's say I'm making 4 drawers, and I'm like, I really don't want to clamp it. I'm still clamping probably 2 of them because of other factors at play. But the goal is to not clamp. And what you can do is when you don't have a ton of glue squeezing, you can get that thing together, bottom your dovetails out, and clean up a little bit if you need, and you place it in the carcass opening, and it adopts the shape of your carcass opening, and you let it sit there for a couple minutes, and then you pull it out gently, right? If you clamp the shit out of something, you're going to bring it out of square, right? You did all this work to size this appropriately, and you've seen it before. You do a panel glue up, and everything's bowed and moved because you went too hard. So getting it like little glue, nice strong joinery, little glue, send it in, let it do its thing, let it adopt the shape. And the panel is not glued in. You can make the panels completely after you fit your drawers. It's like the last thing you're doing. It's totally separate. This panel has a traditional hand plane bevel down to the 1/4 inch, so it starts at 3/8, goes down to a 1/4 inch here, or you can do it at the dado stack, so it just shows you both are fine. Okay, now, that was it.
You guys stop telling the secrets, clamp the shit out of it.